McCarthy Insurance Group, serving the community for over 70 years. For home, farm, motor, life, health and business insurance, log on to mig.ie or free phone 1800 50 11 11. Probably your best call in 2024. Charles McCarthy Insurance is trading as McCarthy Insurance Group, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Real people, real opinions, Real Talk Radio. The multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.
We received a text last night about the public sector and the public service, and there's about 600,000 people in the public sector in this country. That includes nurses, Garda Síochána, teachers, people who work in the Department of Social Protection, the Revenue Commissioners, etc., etc., etc. And here's the message. I would love if you would do a topic about public servants never having to answer for anything. They can be as crap as they want at their jobs or talk to the public like crap, and they have no fear or worry about getting into trouble from their boss or manager like everyone else in the country. Some of these people are a disgrace, and the system they're working in is a bigger disgrace. We should all be held accountable for our wrongdoings in our jobs. You would think this should be the case, especially from public servants, seeing as they deal with the general public. Now, this is, of course, a very one-sided view, and it's definitely a bit harsh. But it kind of got us talking about the old debate, whether which is better, who has it easier, the public or the private sector. Now, when it comes to the public service, there is security. It's difficult to get fired. It is a job for life, I suppose, in most cases, which is no mean feat in today's world. On the negative side, it seems to, I suppose, feel like there's a lack of inspiration in the public sector. You have a job for life, and some people are just hanging on till the life drains out of them. Not to mention there's a lot of red tape as well. But when it comes to the private sector, you are kept on your toes. You know, I suppose that bit more really, aren't you? And there is no job for life, but there is more possibilities. You could earn big if you work hard and know the right people, I suppose. And you can be certain that you will be in 10 years you can be certain in 10 years on what pay you'll actually be on. I mean, that's a bit more exciting, isn't it, I suppose, to some degree. But there is advantages and disadvantages to the public sector and the private sector. The main advantage of the public sector is they pay half your pension. It's a job for life. You can be pretty shit at your job and it won't matter. You won't get fired. The disadvantages of there are less opportunities. In the private sector, there are more opportunities, but it's a bigger risk. It's a bigger gamble. It won't be a job for life. You can get into trouble. You have to work hard. Sometimes you don't get paid for overtime. It's just expected of you because you're on a salary. You don't get money for moving office and silly things like that they do in the public sector. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both. There's a limit to what you can earn in the public sector for the field you're in because it's set down by law as to how much they pay for that particular job. Whereas in the private sector, you can get more money if you're in a better company and they're doing well, or if you're in sales, you get commissions, etc., etc. But which is easier? Which is the better or the easier job? I'm going to put my neck on the line here and say the public sector is for the lazy people. That's kind of an easier job, really, isn't it? The private sector is for the harder working. I'm going to put my neck further on the line and say that I would imagine 50% of people in the public sector wouldn't last a day in the private sector. They'd be out the door. The other way around, 50% of the people in the private sector wouldn't last a day in the public sector because they'd be bored out of their heads because they'd have nothing to do. And I'll give you a quick example. Many years ago, I won't tell you which department it was in. I had a friend whose wife worked in a department in the public sector, and she dealt with applications for a certain thing. And on our first day, you know, she got her training, etc., etc., etc. Second day, your man came to her and he handed her 20 of the applications for the thing that she was doing. And he said, there you go, they're yours. So off she went and she started going through them. In those days, it was about 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, it was more paper than computers. So she kind of checked them, stamped them, did whatever she needed to do with them. She finished them all by about 12 o'clock and she went into him and she said, listen, our supervisor, I finished those. Can you give me a few more? And he went, come here for a second. Close the door. Close the door. He said, listen, you don't want any more today. He says, that's your quota for the day. You'll make everybody else look bad. And she said, but I can do more. And he says, no. You go on outside. And do you smoke? Go on outside and have a cigarette. Sit down and have a cup of tea and read the newspaper or something like that. And just relax. That's enough for today. Because everybody else only worked at that speed anyway. And this was a thing that people really needed in the public sector, that general, members of the public would have been waiting for these applications to come back. I can't tell you which department it was in. But she could have done twice as many, easily. But she wasn't allowed because it would have made everyone else look bad. So that's what you're dealing with in the public sector. If that was in the private sector, that would never be put up with. Because if you weren't performing and you weren't doing the 40 that you should be doing in the day, you'd lose your job very quickly. So here's the thing. Which is easier and which is better? They're two different questions, aren't they, really? The public or the private sector? Maybe you work in the public sector and you think I've got it all wrong. Let me know. Maybe you work in the private sector and you think I've got it all wrong. Let me know. And I suppose I'm talking about administration. If you're a nurse, you're in the public sector, that's hard work, isn't it? But now, hold on for a second. When I talk about nurses being hard work, don't put them up on some sort of pedestal as if they're these, invulnerable people or these wonderful, amazing people. I mean, they are great. They save lives and that's their job. But, and I often hear nurses, they work 12 hours a day. They do work 12 hours a day, but they do that 3 days a week and then they're off for 3 or 4 days. So they still work the same amount of hours as everybody else, but they just do it differently. They might have to stay on a little bit if they're dealing with a patient and somebody else is coming in to take over for them. But we do that in the private sector as well. And they get paid for it, by the way. And if they work at weekends, they get an allowance. If they work after a certain time, they get an allowance. So, it's not, it's not like there's something like immortal about them. School teachers, what do? 27 hours a week? 22? No, it's 23, Jane. 23. No, didn't they put it up an hour? Going back about 3 or 4 years ago. 23 hours a week. They do. And they have 4 months holidays a year, roughly. I mean, what a job, huh? What a job. Anyway, let me know what you think is better, the public or the private sector. I'm not having a go at nurses, by the way. I think they're great. I mean, you really have to have a vocation to be a nurse. I wouldn't do the job. I wouldn't be a guard either, for that matter. Let me go to Terry. Terry, hi, how are you?
How you doing, Niall? How are you?
Good. Terry, are you public or private?
Private.
Right, okay. And do you...
Okay, I'm private, but I don't think... I think public is probably the best one to get into.
Yeah.
But like that, I'm a hard worker, so I would have been bored, I should say, in their jobs. But what I would know over the years, I remember even growing up in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And every time you went out, just say you went into town, you went into the ballroom, or you went into anywhere in town, anybody that was up here from the country was sent up here by their mothers to get a government job.
In the civil service. That's right. They used to call it the civil service. Yeah. That's why. By the way, that's how they got the nickname rednecks.
Right.
Because
and on top of that,
because people used to say, your mother would slap you on the back of the neck and say, get up to Dublin and get a job.
Well, look at their mothers were smart, because they were probably the ones that told them to do very little work, be very less productive, and get all the unions and all, because I'd say most of them have ran the country. Look at even as you want to go as far as Enda Kenny, he was a school teacher.
Yeah.
He got a job as a politician because his father died. Where's the accountability? There has been fuck all accountability in this country for the past 100 years. And there's nobody in any department that has had any controversy. Well, we'll have an investigation into an investigation, we'll have a thing, and they cover it all by data protection. You're not allowed you're not allowed freedom of information. They make it impossible for you to get your own freedom, to get your own information. Look, they do that because they want to cover all of the mistakes that's done, and then they just don't even.
It's like they're trying to invent jobs for each other. You're right, we'll have an inquiry, then we'll have an investigation into the inquiry, then we'll have a citizens' assembly into the investigation into the inquiry, just in case.
Yeah.
So it's like they're just inventing jobs for each other. There's a lot of that goes on. And when we look at, say, the HSE, for example, the nurses work extremely hard, as we all know. But there's a heap of people walking around with folders in their hand, getting, six-figure sums for doing nothing.
Well, look at even what they're after doing in the HSE. Now, they might turn around and say, well, it's easier for them. Wasn't it Vicky Phelan that said she was reading her own file when she came upon the stumbling of the information that was in her own file?
That's right, yes.
So now if I go into a hospital, they must have got smart, because now they don't give you your file. It's all on digital file. So you're not giving your file, because maybe in case you read it, you might see something and you might be able...
But aren't you entitled to it? You can request it if you want it, can't you?
You can request it, but they make it difficult for you. And on top of that, then it's like as if you're a criminal if you try and get it. They make it impossible. They redact quite a lot of your own file. So because it's somebody else's data, it might be somebody saying something about you, but you're not allowed to know what that. Do you understand?
Yeah. And some of the stuff they redact is a bit silly, actually, because I got because I'm adopted, I got my stuff there recently, all my paperwork, right? And there was letters from my mother and father to the Adoption Society, etc., that were filled in and forms filled in. And on it had that my mother already had a daughter, who was my sister, by the way, and they redacted her name. It's like, why would you redact her name? I know who my sister is. You don't have to redact her name. There's no GDPR in that. I've lived with her. I lived with her up until the age of 20 years of age, so I know who she is. It's all a bit daft. Anyway, getting back to the public and private sector, what do you do for a living, Terry? You don't have to tell me where you work, but what do you do?
I'm a bus driver.
Oh, okay. Right, okay. So do you work for a private company?
Yeah, one of my many talents. I've worked in all different types of jobs.
Right.
I worked at cleaning, I worked at dressmaking, I worked at catering, I worked at everything.
Okay.
And in saying that, I have found that in a lot of jobs, like especially in the private sector, if companies will try and take advantage of you.
Yes.
And they'll have you nearly fucking like a slave, like you're going around like you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know. I've been there. Yeah. Where that wouldn't happen in the public sector.
No, it wouldn't happen. And I think if you just kind of stand, like anybody, look, we all like work, and I would do work. I do you an honest day's work. But I won't make you make a fucking fool of me and fucking, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You know, at this day and age, like, you know, it's like some companies or some people think, you know, if you have 1 minute to spare, you should be doing something with it. Whereas some people just need to breathe in that 1 minute. Like, you know.
No, I get you. Well, stay there for a second, Terry. Let me just go to Miriam as well. Miriam, hi, how are you?
Hi, Niall. How are you?
Good. Miriam, public or private sector? Which is better and which is easier?
I would say private sector is easier.
You'd say
public sector is easier.
Oh, the public sector, okay.
I'd say public sector is easier than private.
And are you working yourself in either one?
I'm working in private sector.
Oh, okay. And why do you think the public sector is why do you think the public is easier?
I suppose trying to look at it from all angles. Going into the job that I do, I work in accounts. Right. And part of my job will be debt collection and stuff like that.
Right.
There's little or no protection for when I have to make a phone call and get an absolute bollocking down the phone.
Right, okay. Well, I suppose when you're collecting debts, people are going to be quite nasty to you, probably.
Well, look at, like, if you're buying a product off a company, what's the difference in not paying for it, like walking into a shop and just taking something off the shelf and walking out? Yeah. You can't do that.
And what happens if they don't pay their debt, by the way? Sold
in
on.
Our case, it frees the account, or if they're not paying their debt, it frees the account.
And then if they still don't pay it, most of these companies nowadays, they sell their debts, don't they?
The company are absorbing it. They have to.
But do they not? I'm aware of some companies that what they do after a while is if it's not paid, say within a couple of years, they sell all the debts off.
Well, I don't know. In our case, I don't know if that would be the case. But
yeah.
I think public sector is easier because there's a lot more protection for staff, for regulations, there's a lot more there. You would be less likely to go against a public sector employee.
Yeah, because if you're in the public sector doing your job, you just say to your supervisor, well, I'm not ringing, Johnny Murphy there because he's quite abusive to me. Every time I call him, he's using bad language and all that. I'm not ringing him. Whereas you're the private sector, your boss just say, just ring him for God's sake.
Yeah, well, now I'm very fortunate with my boss that there are certain ones that have been like that, and the boss said, no, I'll handle that one.
Right. Nice.
They don't. But I'm saying in general, I would imagine that the private sector is a lot more difficult working.
Do you think more is expected of you in the private sector? Performance-wise?
I don't know, because I've never worked public sector, so I don't know, but like it's increasingly more difficult.
Yeah.
I think to I suppose from the outside looking in, and you mentioned the HSE there a couple of minutes ago. The word on the street is that there's more administrative staff now in the HSE than there is actually nurses.
Yeah. I call them folder holders, because that's all they do. They walk around holding folders all day.
Yeah. And yet the number of errors that they're making are substantially higher than what they used to in terms of paperwork. I know an example of a gentleman had passed away, an elderly gentleman had passed away. Somebody not directly related to me, but, kind of through marriage. And about 18 months after he passed away, a letter came from the paediatric department of a hospital to him with his date of birth on it.
Right.
He was an elderly man. He was in his, not elderly, the 70s.
Yeah.
He would have been reasonable age. Definitely not somebody who was young enough to see pediatrics.
I know. Well, I actually, coincidentally, I got a letter this morning from a professor, a doctor, for an appointment in December. And it said on the email, thank you very much indeed for your phone message. We've arranged an appointment with Professor XYZ on December, whatever it is, 8 o'clock in the morning. If you want to change this appointment, please, the fee will be $250 on the day, blah, 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 blah. If you want to have this test, or this test, please contact your private health insurance. And I never rang this doctor. I have no idea who he is. I never even left a message for him. If I was looking for an appointment, I wouldn't be able to get one, I imagine.
Well, yeah, look, that's definitely.
And here's the thing. I tried ringing the phone number about 10 times a day, and it's just an answer machine. I've left about 4 messages and nobody even rings you back.
Yeah, I had the same yesterday trying to contact revenue. Like God help anyone that works full time. I'm a part-time worker because I'm a carer for one of my kids. Mm-hmm. But now you can only ring revenue between certain hours. How does full time? Like I would, dread to think if I worked with a very, bad employer, that to have to try and take the time off to make that phone call. You can't make it on work time. You could be, God knows how long, waiting on the phone. But when I actually tried contacting them yesterday, it was like an automated message to say that the lines are that busy, we're not even keeping you on hold.
Yeah. No, I know. It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, but public sector have an awful lot more protection than private sector, I believe.
Okay, stay there for a second. Let me just go to, you can take one there if you want to, Jane. Let me go to Ria. I think it is on. I just flicker on here. Hi, Ria. How are you?
Hi, Niall. How are you?
Good.
I'm really laughing about the matter that you are dealing tonight, because it's like a hot stone for Greece too, public sector and private sector.
Yeah.
It's everywhere in the world, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay, as far as I'm concerned, I have worked for public sector and private sector as well.
Okay, but then you'd be a good judge because you've done both. Okay.
Yes, because I'm a teacher. This is what I studied anyway.
Yep.
So I worked as a teacher in public schools in Greece, and it's really funny because my experience was from the private sector. So when I entered the public sector, it was like huge difference. Okay,
it's like a holiday camp.
Exactly, it was like nothing really.
Yeah.
And I went in there, with my schedule, go early at home, everything else.
Yeah.
And I was listening to other colleagues saying, "Oh, I'm so tired today. Oh, God, I can't do it. Oh, my goodness. And I have to correct all these tests at home, and oh my, and I was looking at it and I was like, holy shit, what world are they living?
Yeah.
We are not from the same kind, you know. They can't understand what it means that these tests in the private sector have to be corrected during the day while you are doing the teaching, you know,
Yeah.
and while you are doing the other stuff, you do like 5 different things at the same time. And they were yelling and complaining all the time for everything. And that's why, if you remember, 1 week ago, I was asking you about strikes.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. There was a strike. You're talking about the doctor
teachers
strike.
In Greece,
Yeah.
The teachers in Greece are always on strike.
For what?
Always.
Why are they always on? Well, they go on strike quite a lot here too, by the way. Why are they always on strike?
Strike all the time for money, for the situation in schools. I don't know what they find. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they want coffee in the morning and they don't have it. You know, they have to pay for the coffee. I don't know, really. I can't get it. Really,
I know here in Ireland, when they asked them to do an extra hour, because they do 22, they were doing 22, now I think they're doing 23. They nearly had a meltdown, you know, to do an extra hour.
Yeah, okay. And they are going to hate you tonight. That's why I was laughing on my voicemail. Because I said, oh, my God, nobody wants to deal with such a matter online, you know, like live.
Yeah, I mean, imagine, you're right about school teachers. If you're doing, you know, Montessori, or you're doing childcare, or you're doing grinds or whatever it is in your private sector, you know, or you're in private school, I mean, you work all year round. If you're in a public sector, you get in this country, you get 4 months holidays a year. Oh, sorry, Jen, you're going to have to get that back. You get 4 months holidays a year, where if you're in the private sector, you wouldn't. You'd probably get your 21 days or 20 days, the same as anybody else in the private sector would get, depending on your contract. I'll take a few more calls on this. The number, as usual, by the way, is 087 188 0008. That's 087 188 0008. I want to know which is better. Now, I don't want to be unfair to the public sector, although in saying that, nearly everybody that's calling in is saying that the private sector is worse, that the public sector is easier. So if you're in the public sector and you want to defend yourself, I'll get Ria back there in a second. If you're in the public sector and you want to defend yourself, I would love to hear from you. You know, if you're in the public sector and you genuinely believe you have it tougher, I'd like to hear from you. And I would say, for example, if you're a member of An Garda Síochána, you know, it's a tough job. But mind you, you know, the perks are great. Like, you got a pension, it's a job for life, unless you really screw it up. It's a job for life. The only thing you'll get fired for in the public sector is gross misconduct. And it has to be really gross misconduct. I mean, if you're in the public sector and you're feeling shit that day, you can go in and I just don't want to do them. Rather than doing the 40 phone calls that you might normally make, I'll just do 5. No one's really going to say anything to you. You're in the private sector, you do that, you're probably out of a job. Sorry, let me get back to Ria. Sorry, Ria,
Yeah.
I don't, what in Greece, by the way, do kids, the schools close for 3 or 4 months of the year as well, including Christmas?
Yes, they close in June and they start again in September.
Yeah.
And of course they have 15 days for Christmas, 15 days for Easter holidays, and all the bank holidays in between.
Yeah.
And the strikes.
The strikes. And how many hours a week do they do? 20? Is it the same, 23?
It depends on your specialty. If you are the main teacher, for example, in the primary school, you do like 3-4 hours a day, 5 days a week, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, handy.
I was a German teacher.
Okay.
So my hours were like 27. Yes.
Yeah, I
was
don't know what it is
doing
about
all the
German.
levels.
I've never learned German, right? And I always, when I listen to German people and the German accent and the language, and somebody from Germany is talking to you.
A lot of German people here in Ireland as well.
Yeah, but you always feel like you're in trouble when they're talking to you. It's a very.
It sounds like like you are joking.
Yeah, no, you just feel like they're giving out to you all the time, even though they're not.
Yeah.
It's just the language.
Yeah.
Well, stay there just for a second. Let me just go to, I think it's Rob is next. Rob, hi, how are you?
Oh, evening, Niall. How's things?
Good. I was talking to Miriam there and Ria, and both of them are saying the public sector. Is anybody going to come on here and say the private sector is easier?
I'm going to be in the same boat on this one as the two ladies. But private sector. Okay, so the salaries might be a little bit better, but job security is certainly an awful lot less.
Of course, yeah.
Of course. And in comparison to public sector, it's pretty much jobs for life.
Yeah.
And particularly the teachers, which I'll come back to in a moment.
Yeah.
But on the nursing side of it, I'd be amazed. I mean, I've been a regular user of the hospital services and what have you. Yeah, in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to bring my mum there as well when she was alive, before I lost her a few years back now. And I'll tell you one thing, old people are treated shamefully in hospitals.
Right, I didn't know what you were going to say. I didn't think you were going to say that, but there you go. But some people have a different experience, I suppose.
No. They're just left to their own devices.
Mm.
Nurses certainly don't want to be cleaning them up or anything like that, or anybody looking at. But in general, though, the nursing thing, and the greatest thing they ever got was this thing, the COVID thing that came 3 years back. I was in and out of the hospitals in St. James's and Tyler and what have you, and experienced A&E departments and all that, and they pretty much sit around, gossiping, talking, little bits of work here. Okay, they do. I will grant them one thing. They have a lot of admin to do. They have a lot of paperwork.
Mm.
But
well, a lot of that's automated now, anyway.
Yeah, it probably is. Yeah.
But I do believe, in fairness, Rob, I do believe the nurses do a good job. Most of them. Some of them are lazy like everybody else, but most of them do a good job. But I'm not buying into this whole thing when people say to me, the nurses are worked to the bone. They do 12 hours a day. They do 12-hour shifts, but that doesn't mean they do 12 hours 7 days a week. You know what I mean? They just do 3 days, and then they're off for 4, I think, or something like that, whatever way it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same as 36 hours.
They are actually well paid for their job.
Well, in comparison to their counterparts in Europe, they're not badly paid, no. Now, they're not as well paid as you would be in Dubai or somewhere else. But the problem with the Irish Health Service for nurses and doctors is the opportunities aren't there. Whereas if they go to the NHS in the UK, although the pay is a little bit less, the opportunities are better. It's bigger.
It is, and Canada.
Yeah, but okay, but getting back to the private sector. So in other words, what you're saying to me is the private sector, you don't know whether you're going to have a job this time next year.
You see, that's it. You don't know it because it's all business related. If the company's making money and they're able to pay their staff good enough, but
yeah, if things start going south, you're in trouble.
But things are going south, but you never know. And if you're in trouble, you're looking over your shoulder.
Yeah. And I suppose that's the one thing Ria would have experienced the difference between the two. When she was private, I'm sure, Ria, you were kind of constantly looking for your own work or making sure you had a job. But when you're public sector, sure, it just doesn't matter. It's a job for life.
Nobody would bother me. In the public sector. It's my own store, I own the store, if you know what I mean. I had to come to confront the public sector here in Ireland because I needed medical card, I needed child benefit, I needed working family payment, and I had to do all the paperwork by myself and read all the laws and everything by myself in another language. Okay.
Yeah.
And ask questions to the public servants when I was calling them. Mm-hmm. The worst experience from all of them was with HSC. The worst ever.
Yeah.
The worst ever. For the medical card. They asked me, because they wanted to see my expenses. Okay, fair enough, because it means testing, the medical card. Okay, I agree. I totally agree with that. They asked me about my rent. So I sent them my receipts from my landlord. Okay. And they call me again and they say, could you please send us also statements from the bank that shows that you pay him? I said, he gave me receipts. I pay him. No, we want your bank statements which shows every month that you pay him. I said, how did he give me receipts? I have the RTB. He's completely normal. I have a contract. No, we want the bank statements unless he gave us a letter that he says that he gets the money. I said, he's not my uncle. I pay him. I'm Greek. He's Irish. I just came to Ireland. No, we need that. They were asking me constantly about paperwork that doesn't make any sense. I applied in July and I got my medical card 2 weeks ago.
Wow. That took a long time.
They were asking me for more paperwork. They were, because I have a 16-year-old son, he has to make his own application. So they said they need proof where he lives. I said, he doesn't have any bills in
his name. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
What am I supposed to send you? A
With your driver's license or something?
You know.
Still, hang on. Stay there just for a second, Ria. Let me just go to Jerry as well. Now, Jerry, you're saying the private sector's better.
Yes.
Okay.
Better for the worker.
Better for the worker?
The person that's in this private sector, yes.
Okay. And how do you work that one out?
Well, put it this way. You have no guilty conscience. You know what I mean? You're doing a hard day's work.
Yeah.
And you get paid at the end of the week.
Yeah.
And you don't feel like, well, I did nothing this week, but I'm still getting paid.
Yeah, well, that depends on how you feel, doesn't it, really? Some people are quite happy to do nothing.
Yeah, you earn your crust. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's my opinion on it. And I think, at the end of the day, the feel-good factor in working and earning your pay. You know what I mean? You feel good.
So what you're saying to me is then is the public sector is easier?
Well, I wouldn't say easier.
But you don't have to do as much, like. You don't have to prove yourself.
No, the public sector is given. You're in the job for life. Well, no, that might have changed.
Well, you are more or less, yeah. Unless you do something drastically wrong.
Yes, unless you murder somebody. But in the context of it, I think, from an employee's point of view, I think if you work in the private sector, you tend to be more motivated. You will have a better feel-good factor. You will be driven to succeed.
But sometimes you can be pushed too far in the private sector. A lot of people say in the private sector you get taken advantage of. Like you're expected to do the extra hour in the day when it's busy and you don't get any extra money for it and all this kind of stuff. So you're kind of taken advantage of a little bit more in the private sector.
Well, that can be the case, but also in the public sector you can have a situation where you have somebody in authority that has a bee in their bonnet about the worker and tends to be a bully and tends to be condescending and aggressive and knows they have the protection of...
I think the bully wouldn't last long in the public sector. I think the bully would last longer in a private sector. But I think in the public sector, he'd be found out very quickly or she'd be found out very quickly.
That's debatable. That is debatable. That's probably another conversation.
Yeah, well, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, in the public sector, you have the benefits of, obviously,
pension.
Backing of the government. The taxpayers paying your wages, more or less.
Yeah.
In the private sector, you have to, as they earn your crust, and you tend to be, depends on where you are. Like if it's some poor individual, let's say a shop worker or whatever, they don't have much rights. They can be sacked very easy. They can be given harsh conditions. In the public sector, you don't normally get that. But it's kind of a what's the way of putting it? It swings and roundabouts really. Working in the private sector is a better feel-good factor.
Okay, so your job satisfaction, in other words.
Yes, definitely. Working in the public sector, you're going to go to work anyway. You're going to maybe dust half the time, put in a few hours, collect your pay irregardless.
Yeah.
So there lies the difference.
Like if I was working in the public sector now, I could just come on the air and go, "Good afternoon and welcome to the Live Line," and then everybody would just. And then everybody would just ring in and say what they want to say, and I could just sit here going, sure.
And you see, the other side of it, like, where you're talking about, is probably public sector.
But he's not actually. He's a private company. He's actually his own private company, isn't he? He's a contractor.
Well, maybe so. He's contracted, perhaps.
Yeah. I was jesting. Yeah.
I know. Again, that's probably another nice talk as well.
But there's no doubt that the people who work within radio, for example, in RTE, have it easier than the people in independent radio. Like, we would do a show at one stage here, as you know, I used to do the two shows. I used to do the daytime and the nighttime show. And there was three of us, did both shows, and that was 5 hours of broadcasting a day. If you take one show for an hour long on RTE, they probably have a team of 10 or a team of 10, and they don't produce anything better. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, and there's always a person there to make the tea. There's a person to make the phone calls. There's a person to put on his headphones for him. There's a person to plug everything in. I remember somebody once telling me once they worked in RTE, and their headphone socket was a bit dodgy, and they took you kind of screw off the jack plug to see could they fix it, and somebody came in and said, "Don't touch that. the union, there'll be a strike if you touch that. He said, you have to get an electrician in to fix it. He said, I can fix it myself. And he said, no, you can't. You're not allowed. Yeah.
Yeah, demarcation. Like, again, you know, I can't say where I work, but I did work in the public sector. I'm retired now. But there was that situation where, you know, say, for example, something had to be taken apart. One trade would take the cover off, another trade would lift out the part, another trade would fix the part. You know, you had 3 people involved in the one
part. Yeah.
And again, that boils back to the age-old thing where, you know, a demarcation. All trades tend to be kind of, one trade for each part of the, whatever, the engine or the equipment. And that's the way it was. And that's probably filtered through, as you say, the headphone socket. It's a similar situation.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't happen in your case in the private sector.
No, you fix it yourself. I'd be on the ground here halfway through a show sometimes trying to fix things.
Yeah.
I remember doing a show when Andy Bad News used to be working here. I'm sure some of you may think back and remember we used to mention Andy Bad News all the time. He was a program director here at one stage. I can remember doing the daytime show, and he was on the floor between me legs with a screwdriver in his hand because the radio station was going on and off the air, and he was trying to fix it while I was doing the show. That would never happen in RTE.
No.
Anyway, sorry, but say everything because I want to go to Kyle. Oh, here's the Clash of the Titans. Ria is a school teacher who was in the private sector and was given out about the public sector. Kyle is a school teacher and I'm assuming works in the public sector. Kyle, hi, how are you?
Hi, Niall. How are you?
Good. You work in the public sector?
Yeah, I'm a secondary school teacher.
Okay. Ria was a school teacher in the private sector and the public sector, and she said she couldn't believe how easy it was in the public sector. It was like a holiday.
Yeah, I think there's positives and negatives. When I was in college, I worked in the private sector. Having recently qualified, working in the public sector now, I would say that it's a lot better. I do think teachers they don't realise how nice their job is.
Yeah, the perks, great.
Yeah, holidays are amazing.
Yeah,
pay is very good. But I would say is we're contracted to teach 22 hours a week.
Is it 22 or 23? Myself and Jane were arguing with this earlier.
It's 22 hours and 40 minutes, but if that's just 22 minutes.
All right, okay.
And then you might have like shorter time of 10 minutes.
But didn't they try and introduce an extra hour going back a few years ago and there was murder over it?
I think so.
Yeah.
If you have anything over 18 hours, if you have 18 hours and you get paid for the 22. So I'm actually only contracted to teach 19 hours a week.
Right.
But I get paid for the 22.
So you get paid full time. Yeah.
But having saying that, and another thing I didn't realise until I went into teaching is I could have 2-3 hours off in the day as well. So I might only be in the morning for an hour. I could be off for 2 hours.
Because you wouldn't have a class. Because you wouldn't have a class.
Yeah, I have no class. Now the other side of teaching is I was working till 8 o'clock this evening, planning and doing my lesson plans and all the stuff that comes with that, planning outside curricular stuff that teachers don't get paid for.
Yeah, and that's because you're a good teacher. But that's because you're a good teacher. And we've seen this during COVID more so than ever before. We've seen kids, because there was a lot of obviously remote schooling, and some teachers were good, and they were really good at it. They put the effort in, they put the work in to be with the kids and personally talk to them on FaceTime or whatever it was. But some teachers just didn't do very much. And we've seen the difference between teachers in those situations because they were forced to work at home. There are teachers like you, Kyle, who would go the extra mile for, extracurricular activities, etc., or whatever it is, or giving them a few extra tests and correcting them when you get home and stuff like that. But there are other teachers who wouldn't be bothered because there's no obligation to do it. Really, is there?
And I would say if I know teachers like that. There's teachers like that in every school, and if they are like that, they can easily they get away with it. They can do the bare minimum. Once they're showing up to their class and they're there.
Yeah. A mate of mine is a school teacher, and he's now 26 years, I think, a school teacher. But he was telling me the principal in this new school that he was in, going back about 5 or 6 years ago, called him into the office. He thought he was in trouble, and he went in, well, what's the problem? And he said, look, you haven't really taken any sick days. And he said, that's because I haven't really been sick. And he said, you need to take a few. He said, you're making everyone else look bad. That's the truth. That's what they said to him, because he hadn't taken sick days.
Yeah, we get 5 personal days a year. That's like, obviously because of our holidays and stuff that we get, we're entitled to
personal days.
So that's where, if you had a wedding or graduation or something particular.
Is the 4 months that you get off a year not enough, like?
Well, I think it's nearly more than 4 months. The 3 months summer holidays, 2 weeks of Easter, 2 weeks of Christmas. I've midterm come up now in 3 weeks.
Yeah, so it's more than 4 months. Is it like, why do you need another 6 personal days? Why can't you just take that at your own expense, like?
Well, if you come into my school, Niall, and you're shouting at 17-year-olds for hours on end, you'd need the holidays as well.
Yeah, see, I wouldn't do your job, because I'd lose the head with them. I wouldn't have the patience.
No, I am here saying that the public sector is better and easier, but I will have to admit we have a very tough job. I've cried some days leaving school. It's a very stressful job, and you need.
And what makes it stressful? It's just some of the students who just will not behave, or yeah.
I work in a really tough cadet school.
Yeah.
In Dublin.
Yeah.
Now a lot of the kids are great. It's the few who.
Yeah.
Who just,
there's always a few bad apples.
You need. I can't stress enough how much patience you need as a teacher. But at the end of the day, it's always the good kids who make your job worth it.
Yeah. So hold on, Ria. Just before I go into the break.
Yes.
There you go. You've been listening to Kyle. He's working in the public sector as a school teacher, and you know it is a tough job. Even though he does admit it's a bit easier in some sense. Oh, are you there, Ria?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm listening to you right now. Look, the job is teaching other kids. It's really joyful, and I really love kids. Okay, and it
depends on the kids, by the way.
You have to do that job. You have to do that job because it's very fulfilling. And at the end of the day, when you know that the kids at any age learn something from you, you know, you feel nice.
There's a satisfaction to it, of course, and particularly when they do well.
Very satisfied work. And it's not even a work, it's a duty. It's very important for you because you are dealing with the best years of a person.
Yeah.
They will remember you like something good, like something bad, you know.
Yeah, we all remember our school teachers, yeah.
Exactly. It doesn't matter if it's a public section or private section. It's a very sensitive job. Okay. And the unfortunate is that most of the people, not most, but a lot of people anyway, a lot of colleagues, see that just as a public section, period. They don't care if they are teachers. They are in public section, that's it. This is what I'm allowed to do. I had to confront and I had conflicts with a lot of colleagues because I'm also a special education teacher. So they didn't want to deal with my kids, you know, the special needs kids. They didn't want them in their classes. They were annoyed by their behavior, you know. And I had to deal with conflicts like that. Oh, I'm not, I don't have to tolerate that. I'm just the teacher of the class. Take your kid and go out. He's making a noise. You know, they didn't have that sensitivity. That's just public servants. And we have to distinguish public sections. Working in a public office, it's something else. Working in a public hospital, it's something else. Working as a guardie is something else. You know, it's not all the same. It's public section, but not the same duties.
I get
it.
You
are not dealing with the same.
But the other thing is, and Kyle, I think we'll all accept this, and everybody tonight is more or less saying the same thing. You don't have to be really good at your job to survive in the public sector. But if you're not good at your job in the private sector, you're out the door.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, to put that one to Kyle. Would you accept that, Kyle?
I've never heard of a teacher getting fired, and if they did, they'd have to be doing something
Yeah,
very
well,
serious.
certainly not for performance. They never got fired. I have heard of 2 teachers in the last 10 years, I think, fired, but that was because there was criminal activities involved.
Yeah, but performance.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like I said, once you just show up and you're in your class, then
that's it.
Real people, real opinions, Real Talk Radio. The multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.
Ireland's classic hits.